Welcome to Brad Dacus Live. I'm Brad Dacus, president and founder of the Pacific Justice Institute. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to go through and give you an overview of where the cases are that are so important to our freedoms and liberties. We find this very, very, very helpful. We're also going to talk about some of the key legislative matters that are taking place on a state level, as well as some of the things on the federal level as well. And then we're also going to talk about church engagement, how you can empower your church politically, evangelically. I think it's going to be a real packed time with a lot of information that you're going to be able to take and utilize on a number of different fronts. So I want to first start off by just letting you know how much we at Pacific Justice Institute greatly appreciate, deeply appreciate those of you who do receive our case updates, who stay up with what we're doing. I want you to know it means a lot to me personally, not just to know that people are out there being equipped, being empowered, but also to know that you guys are praying for us, that prayer is very important. It's not something we take lightly at Pacific Justice Institute. I have seen the hand of God intervene on cases before, and I'll give you just one example. It was a case dealing with some homeschoolers. And the appellate court in California had held that homeschooling was illegal. Unless you're a credentialed teacher, it was illegal. 3 judges ruled this way, definitively. We petitioned for the court to rehear the case. And they did rehear the case. And it was fantastic. We were very pleased with that. But when we went to the oral argument, the 3 judges doubled down in their opposition to our position. They made it very clear that they were hostile to any parent having any right to homeschool unless they were a credentialed teacher. It was so bad that when I called and talked to our chief counsel, Kevin Snyder, who represented our clients in that case, he told me, he says, it's so obvious that they're going to rule against us, reaffirm their earlier decision, and that we need to already start preparing the appeal to the state Supreme Court. In my life, I had never heard our chief counsel say that. In the past, he said, well, this is a good case, or this may be tough. We may not win. I see some possibilities. This is the first time he said definitively, we have already lost, and we need to prepare for the appeal to the state Supreme Court. So a lot of homeschoolers, they were watching this case, and they contacted us, and they talked to me and said, Brad, how's it going? I said, according to our chief counsel, we already lost. Hence, the only way we're going to win is an intervention from God. So pray, pray, pray. And you know what? That's what they did. Up and down the state of California, maybe beyond California, homeschoolers were praying. And many of them realized that if that decision held, they were going to have to leave the state of California in mass, more than we've ever seen or maybe ever will see. So absent a huge earthquake. So they were praying, and guess what? Those 3 judges came down with their decision, reversing themselves and their earlier decision 3-0, holding that parents do have a right to homeschool, even if they're not a credentialed teacher. Checkmate. Unbelievable. And then when they appealed it, the state superintendent and the people from the left in Sacramento, the governor and all of us who are adamant enemies against homeschoolers in every way, shape, and form, when they petitioned this to the state Supreme Court refused to take it up, and they let it stand. So please go to our website, sign up, get our cases updates. I'm going to give you some case updates right now. One case, as many of you knew, we defended the churches that were shut down, particularly in blue states, intolerant, oppressive states that have a demise against Christians and God in general. California is a classic example. The governor of California, Governor Gavin Newsom, is a classic enemy of people of faith, institutions of faith, so much so that when it came time to reopen things after the big shutdown, he allowed strip clubs to be opened up, pot shops, marijuana places, dispensaries, tattoo places, restaurants, you name it. They all opened up, except the churches and the synagogues. He wanted to keep them shut down as much as possible. In fact, this was the protocol of every blue state and their governor in the state of the entire country. Keep the churches shut down. Keep them closed, and the synagogues. And what happened, by the way? Do you remember what happened when the churches were shut down? When the conscience of the nation was stifled and silenced? I don't think it's any accident that we at the same time had the massive race riots, the race BLM, hate-filled, racist riots that destroyed families, destroyed stores, massive thievery, stealing, theft, crime. That was all done in the name of BLM and what they stand for and what they're all about. It's disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful and shameful. Well, you know what? Would that have happened if a lot of those people had gone to church and their pastor said what the Bible said about that? I don't think so. I don't think it would have happened, at least in the degree that it did. Yeah, there's a lot of racism that comes through BLM, but I think there's still a lot of believers that participate in those riots that may not have and may have been exhorted and reproved up front not to have done so. That's what happens when the church is silenced, folks. Well, we at Pacific Justice Institute, as many of you know, what happened. We took on these cases where the churches were shut down. And we defended churches. In San Jose, we had 5 churches. We took these to all the way up, rapid fire, to the United States Supreme Court. And Supreme Court, after just not 3 years, not 3 months, not 3 weeks, after just 3 immediate days of emergency deliberation, ordered Governor Gavin Newsom of California, open those churches and synagogues now. And he did, because he had to, not because he wanted to. And governors of other intolerant, oppressive states like Oregon, Washington, Illinois, the governor of Illinois, Massachusetts, these governors who had just unshamefully, overtly oppressed people of faith and treating people of faith like dirt, were forced to open their doors of the churches and to take off the symbolic chains, if you will, and locks, and allow them to open without fear of being punished and oppressed in the United States of America. So that's what was that. Well, the pastor called out to us, and we have an office there in Michigan, like we do all over the country, folks. And our attorney, David Peters, fantastic attorney, heads up our office here in Michigan. He represented the pastor, and someone else represented the 89-year-old. She was represented. And they came back with a guilty verdict. But they hadn't issued, for trespass and violation of the Faith Act, but they hadn't issued the penalties yet. And by the time they came back with their guilty verdict, something had happened. An election had happened where there was going to be a change in the White House and a change with the Department of Justice. So what happened? Well, the Department of Justice, was pushing for their 11 years behind bars from this pastor to be kept from his boys and his church and the work that he was doing. But the judge, miraculously, I have to add, did something very unorthodox. He says, you know what? I know it's time to issue the judgment, to issue the actual sentencing, the burdening, what they're going to have to serve, et cetera. But because there's been a change in the White House, there's a good chance that the Department of Justice is going to have new leadership and a new attorney general. They might see this case a little differently. So I'm going to hold off on a judgment on terms of actual penalty, sentencing. I'm going to hold off on that until the new attorney general is there, sworn in, and we can see if this is the direction that the new attorney general and the new Department of Justice wants to go. Folks, this was a God thing. I've never seen that before. Never in my life. Practicing law for several decades. I've never seen that before. And you know what happened? The new attorney general came in and says, Your Honor, we want to drop the charges and drop any request, not only for sentencing, but also drop the charges completely. The judge did, and justice was done. Now, folks, when we return, we're going to talk about some other cases, including 2 major multi-million-dollar verdicts for religious freedom and parents' rights after this.
Is God speaking to me? Is this the voice of the Lord or just my own thoughts? We've all wondered at times how to discern His voice and direction. Lisa Turkhurst shares with you her own struggles, and through scripture, personal stories, and practical application, she'll help you learn to recognize and respond to God's call, using 5 key questions to discern if a message is really from Him. Is God Speaking to Me? A book by Lisa Turkhurst is our gift this February for any donation of $10 or more. Yes, help His channel broadcast the good news of Jesus Christ 24 hours a day. Become a partner today and make salvation possible for the lost. Visit hischannel.com and click the donation link, or send your tax-deductible gift to His Channel, P.O. Box 25, Santa Ana, California, 92702.
Welcome back to Brad Dacus Live. Now, what's going on with regards to the pandemic and people losing their jobs? We at Pacific Justice Institute, we led the nation, folks, on these cases. We took these on. I remember when it first happened, people were starting to be purged, not because of the work that they were doing, but because of their faith and their convictions against an experimental vax, which turned out not to even really be a vax, and that it didn't prevent transmission at all, which means there was literally no legitimate reason for people to be required to be vaxxed in the first place. If it's only impacting their body and it's not going to prevent transmission, then it's illogical. But we at PJI, we looked at other organizations because I want to see who's out there, who's taking these on. I called the largest with the biggest budget, the biggest salaries. You know what they told me? They said, we're not touching them. Too controversial. No, we're just too many people. We're not touching them. So I called another one, the very big budget, much bigger salaries. And they said the same thing. I called another one. They said, well, they're taking one case. One. I finally called another organization, smaller, back east. They said, yeah, we're taking these on. We thought we were the only ones. Are you going to do it, Pacific Justice Institute? I said, yes, we are. They said, fantastic. Brothers, let's do all we can. And we stepped in, and with our footprint and all that it was, I will say, our attorneys worked brilliantly. So we at Pacific Justice, we defend the churches and people of faith, reaching out with the gospel and the love of Christ, people in the workplace. Well, the city of San Francisco, via the Bay Area Rapid Transit Division, decided to lay off a lot of people of faith. And we represented them. We got settlements for the overwhelming majority of them. But you know what else happened? There were, at the end of the day, there were a half a dozen, 6 to be exact, who said, we're not taking settlements for wrongfully firing us because of our faith. We want this to go to trial. And we said, look, you know what you're passing up? This is a nice settlement. They said, yeah, but if we take that, there's no public vindication. It's all hush hush. We want public vindication. We want this to go to trial. So we took it to trial. In the first trial, it was 8-1 against our clients. But because it wasn't a majority, it was a hung jury, then it had to be a new trial. And in the new trial, it was 9-0 in favor of our clients. And they came down with a 9.8 seismic, 7.8 $million judgment, seismic judgment against San Francisco. And it's something that municipalities across the country are taking notice of. And we're seeing cases, we're expecting more cases to settle. And one thing about Pacific Justice Institute, folks, is we not only have lots of attorneys all across the country, lots of offices, but we also have a reputation that when we say we're going to sue, we sue. It was a great victory, great success. Another big victory success that we had just recently was not dealing with religious freedom, but, well, it was religious freedom, but more importantly, parental rights and free speech. Parents, after when they spoke up against a superintendent who, in a school district near Waco, Texas, decided to cancel graduation altogether because there were a few kids who weren't going to graduate, and he wanted a perfect track record, having everyone qualify to graduate. He punished all the kids and said, no, none of you are graduating. So you got to pressure these other kids to do their assignments, to meet the requirements, and then we'll have graduation because I want a perfect track record. Sick. I think the man's sick personally. I mean, that's demented as far as I'm concerned. So what happened? The parents spoke up against it, especially the parents of the valedictorian that had written her speech. Well, they protested at the public meeting put on by the superintendent. And it's like a school board meeting, and parents are supposed to have an opportunity to express themselves pursuant to the First Amendment right of redress of government. But some parents were not given that right. Instead, they were forcefully thrown out by the superintendent with law enforcement working under him that worked just for the school district. And then he thought he doubled down. He went and punished with retribution against the children of these parents. And they decided to actually change the grades of the valedictorian so she would no longer be valedictorian. Yeah, and guess what? There was an outcry. Even though her third grade brother had his grades lowered. I mean, this is sick. And this was alleged and proven to be done under the direct authorization and action by the superintendent. We at Pacific Justice filed a lawsuit. Oh, and by the way, he did decide to go ahead and change the grades back so she could be valedictorian. But then he said, oh, but no valedictorian speech this year. You're not going to be able to give a speech this year for the graduation when it was actually going to happen. So we filed a lawsuit. And this took over 2 years of litigation. I don't think any other organization would have stepped up to this. But we did. And God blessed it. Big time. The jury came down with a decision. $7.5 million judgment, most of it against the superintendent in his individual capacity. This is huge, folks. Now, I don't know why, but another school district, Hitchcock School District near Galveston, last report, I heard they hired this guy, the superintendent. He's not there anymore. So they hired him at this other school district. Shame on them. They can hire who they want to hire, and but there's no way I would hire someone like this, that devoid of character and the way he carried himself. Hopefully, he'll learn his error of his ways. Hopefully, he'll mature. Hopefully, he'll be more sensitive to his conscience and do what's right, as opposed to what furthers him and his own personal ambitions, especially when it comes to treating children with the respect that they deserve after working so hard to achieve what they've achieved. And respect the rights of parents to be able to speak out for their children without retribution. Parents don't have some of the same protections that they have when they put their child in a private school versus a public school. They don't, because private schools are private. So it can be very problematic, number one. And number two, many of these private schools they're not Christian. Even if they say St. Mary's or St. this, they're often not Christian at all. In fact, I will say one of the most dangerous ones are Episcopal private schools. If you have a child in an Episcopal private school, as a general rule, you're playing with fire for your children's soul and salvation. That may seem strong to some of you, but do your homework. What do they push? What do they preach on Sunday mornings? Do you want your child to be taught that it's okay to engage in same-sex sex acts? It's okay to, get hormone shots and quote unquote try to change your gender? The death and destruction that happens in this life, much less spiritually, what's taking place. So private schools are not safe. You need to do your homework. If they look like a Christian school, talk to them. Find out what's actually in the chapel service. There's some universities. There's one Christian university here in Southern California, Orange County, last semester. Couldn't believe the garbage they brought into their chapel services. They used to put the chapel services, by the way, online so parents could watch them. They don't do it anymore. They're in Orange County. I'm not going to say who they are this time. I'll let you do your own homework. But you'll be shocked and surprised. They're not all like Cal Baptist University. where they really do their work to protect and make sure that truth goes forth to the kids, and they have solid professors with Christian biblical worldviews. Um, that's so important. So private schools, be cautious. Now some of you are saying, well, but I homeschool, so I'm fine, right? Well, not necessarily, especially if you live in a state or a city that has zealous social workers. They often target homeschoolers. And yeah, you're probably more protected. You are more protected if your child was in a public school. Because public school, social worker can just go into a public school, pull the kid out of class. Teacher says, yeah, I heard he thinks he may be a girl. Pull him out of class, engage in all kinds of interrogation questions with no audio tape, videotape. Write down what she wants to say and say, okay, Your Honor, I want a warrant to take this child from these parents. They're dangerous Christians. We've seen that happen. We've had those cases. But it can also happen to you if you homeschool, because there's often like a suspicion that neighbors might have, people who are from a different worldview. They often are enemies of homeschoolers because they know that oftentimes homeschoolers are teaching things that they totally are against, like the Bible. So we have something that's a valuable, very valuable tool for homeschoolers. And I want you to take note of this. If you have in fact, it's not just for homeschoolers, it's for every parent with children, period. Homeschool, private school, or public school. And it's a form, and it's one that's entitled 12 Steps to Protect Your Children from CPS or social workers. It's called different things in different states. 12 Steps to Protect Your Children from CPS. It's very important, very valuable. Every family should download that. You say, well, I'll wait. I'll make a note of that. When a social worker calls me or knocks on my door, I'll pull that up. It's too late, folks. The most important critical decisions you make is made in that first contact with the social worker. That will often determine whether or not you keep your child. So in that article, every family should download it. You love your children. You don't want your child taken by social workers. And they take them for all kinds of reasons, including religious reasons. Then go to our website, download it. You don't have to pay anything. There's no, Amway presentation at the end. There's no, it's just given to you out of love by our attorneys and our legal experts to protect your children. Take advantage of it. In fact, I encourage you not only to download it, but to give copies of it to families throughout your church. Talk to your pastor, get his consent, obviously. I don't see why any pastor would object to it, but get that information and make that available. Maybe have your pastor announce that it's available to protect children, families from social workers possibly wrongfully investigating and taking your children. Every single family should have it. Every churchgoer, every family should have it, period. But this, through churches, is a great way of distributing it and getting it out. That, along with the other article I talked about with the opt-out forms, those are probably our two most popular articles. We have some other great resources about faith in the workplace, how to live your faith on college campuses and public schools. We have a book on how you can legally evangelize public schools. Excuse me, practically and legally evangelize public schools. And we at Pacific Justice really enjoy and delight in partnering with ministries that are doing and carrying out what we're saying. So, for example, one ministry is decisionpoint.org. You want to get involved and use ministry? Go to decisionpoint.org. Talk to your church. They're always looking for churches willing to sponsor them, not financially, but just to come alongside them. Why? Because they're going into high schools and they're having outreach weeks in the gyms, and kids are coming out of the bleachers to receive Jesus. But they don't want to do it if there's not a church that they can have these kids bonded with and to become a part of so they can grow. So they're willing to do the tough stuff. They're willing to do the fishing. They just want someone on the shore with a basket that can take the fish and be responsible. That's what they're looking for across the country. We at Pacific Justice, we defend a decision point all over the country. In Chicago, there were 23 high schools that says we won't let you in. They had churches ready for the fish and to work with them and to embrace them. But 23 high schools says, no, we're not going to let you do outreach weeks in our church, in our public high schools. They contacted us, our attorney out of Chicago. You know what he did? He sent out a demand letter to all 23, and all 23, they know Pacific Justice Institute, and they changed their minds. The outreach weeks happened, and kids came to Jesus in Chicago. So I want to encourage you as we talk about these cases and things to, yes, protect your kids, protect your church, protect your job, but also be open to being used by God for such a time as this. In closing, I will say we are in the middle of a revival. It's indisputable. The last year, the numbers coming to Christ, particularly young men coming to Christ, Gen Zs go to churches now more than any other generation. Unbelievable. So there you have it, folks. It's our God-given freedoms we're talking about. Now, let's choose to keep them. I'm Brad Dacus, president of the Pacific Justice Institute. Let's continue the fight for your freedoms.